For decades, Brazil has been a huge player on the world stage, right? A diplomatic powerhouse with a long, long history of global engagement. But there's this one goal that's always remained just out of reach: a permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council. So let's get into the story of Brazil's long and fascinating quest to claim a spot at the world's top table. Now, this might surprise you, but right at the very birth of the UN, Brazil was on the brink of becoming a permanent member. Seriously, this isn't some recent ambition. This story goes all the way back to the beginning. So, what on earth happened? Okay, so picture this. World War II is ending, and the US President Franklin Delano Roosevelt himself suggests Brazil for a permanent seat. Why? Well, he was recognizing the crucial role Brazil's expeditionary force played fighting alongside the Allies. The idea had serious momentum, but then it just hit a wall. Both the United Kingdom and the Soviet Union pushed back because they were worried about the balance of power on this new council. And just like that, the opportunity vanished. But the ambition, that was just getting started. But here's the thing, Brazil wasn't just sitting on the sidelines back in 1945. Their delegation was incredibly active and assertive from day one. They successfully championed core principles we now take for granted, like non-intervention. And what's really remarkable for the time, they led the charge to get equal rights for men and women written directly into the UN Charter, thanks to diplomats like Bertha Lutz. And that legacy of engagement, it just kept growing after 1945. By 1956, Brazil was part of the very first armed UN peacekeeping mission in Suez. Fast forward to 1992, they're hosting the Rio Earth Summit, a huge moment for global environmental policy. And by 2004, they're forming powerful alliances like the G4 to officially demand change. You see, this isn't some new idea. It's a claim built on decades of showing up and doing the work. So, how does a country prove it's ready for a permanent leadership role? You don't just ask for it, right? You build a resume. And that's exactly what Brazil has spent decades doing, building its case through concrete actions, especially in the incredibly demanding field of international peace and security. Just think about this number for a second. 13. For 13 straight years, Brazil commanded the entire military force of the UN stabilization mission in Haiti, known as MINUSTA. This was one of the UN's most complex and challenging operations ever, and Brazil was at the helm, from the very start in 2004 all the way to its end in 2017. And we're not just talking about soldiers here. Modern peacekeeping is way more complex, and Brazil's involvement reflects that. They provide everything from civilian police and election experts to engineers and health personnel. It really shows a sophisticated, modern approach to how you actually build and keep the peace. But despite this incredible resume, Brazil keeps running into this fundamental roadblock. This quote from former Chancellor Araújo Castro just nails the country's long-standing critique. He argued that the UN's power structure was, in his words, a freezing of world power. Basically, that it was stuck in time, reflecting a world that just doesn't exist anymore. And at the very heart of that frozen power structure is one single mechanism: the veto. The 5 permanent members, the P5, can single-handedly block any important resolution. It literally doesn't matter if the other 14 members of the council all agree. One no vote from a permanent member stops it dead in its tracks. This chart shows you that power imbalance perfectly. You've got the 10 elected, non-permanent members who serve for 2 years, and then you have the P5. It's not just a numbers game, it's a difference in kind. The veto creates 2 totally different classes of membership on the UN's most powerful body. And all of this brings us to the core of Brazil's argument for reform. Look, the world has changed so dramatically since 1945. New economic and political powers are on the scene. The challenges we face are global. Yet the Security Council's basic structure is the same, which Brazil and many, many others argue just undermines its legitimacy and, frankly, its effectiveness. So when you're faced with a system that seems frozen solid, you can't just sit around and wait for an invitation. You have to get strategic. You have to actively push for change. And to do that, Brazil has developed a very specific diplomatic playbook. The main strategy is all about strength in numbers. Back in 2004, Brazil joined forces with Germany, India, and Japan to form what's known as the G4. These 4 nations all believe they've earned a permanent seat, and together they push for a major overhaul, one that expands the council with new permanent and non-permanent members, including, crucially, representation for Africa. But, it's never that simple, is it? This push for reform creates some really complex politics, even with close neighbors. Take Argentina, a key strategic partner for Brazil. While Brazil leads the G-Force charge for new permanent seats, Argentina leads a rival group called Uniting for Consensus, and they oppose creating any new permanent seats. They argue it would just create more privilege, and that it's better to just add more elected non-permanent members. Beyond making alliances, Brazil has also tried to lead with ideas. After the really controversial 2011 NATO intervention in Libya, Brazil proposed this concept of responsibility while protecting. The idea wasn't to block interventions to save civilians, but to add some crucial guardrails, that force must be an absolute last resort, and that there has to be strict accountability to prevent missions from going way beyond their original mandates, which is what many felt happened in Libya. So why, with all this effort, has nothing changed? Well, because the bar to make it happen is incredibly, incredibly high. To change the UN Charter, first, you need a 2/3 vote in the General Assembly, okay? Then, 2/3 of all member nations have to ratify that change in their own governments. And here's the real kicker. Step 3, that group must include all 5 permanent members. Any one of the P5 can veto the entire reform effort. And that's the impasse. That's where we are. Brazil has built this powerful case for itself. It has the history, the contributions, the diplomatic strategies. It's a strong, credible candidate by any measure. But it's up against a system that was designed decades ago to be almost impossible to change, a system that gives the final say to the very powers whose exclusive club is being challenged. Ultimately, Brazil's whole quest raises a much bigger question for all of us. In a world that's changing so fast, our global institutions are facing a real crisis of relevance. The question isn't just whether Brazil deserves a seat, it's whether a system built for the world of 1945 can actually work for the world of today. And maybe the most important question of all is, who gets to decide?